like to talk through the next content module, first part of our course in composition, and how we can use these techniques for our own sound exploration, and see how these techniques are going to be able to work for us, but also maybe for our students too. This is the first part of our second module about new chords and scales. And the hope here is to kind of move beyond our standard sort of acceptance of major and minor and the sort of sounds that they invoke, and kind of also accept the combinations of those in different ways, or ways that we can alter our standard sounds. So for this video, I have a little bit of sound coming from a piano keyboard here, which I hope everybody can hear, and I believe that's all working okay, as well as some PDFs that we have to read and explore, and some videos to check out. So I've gone through this with my, I use this in a undergraduate course in composition for composition majors and others, and it turns into some neat projects, and so I appreciate everybody giving this a good shot and an open mind, and your feedback in the discussions are always welcome. I really enjoy sort of getting to know your professional opinions about these techniques and how they might fit or not fit with what you do. So starting off, we have two kind of concepts here, and these were most notably advanced in the early 20th century by the American composer Henry Cowell. And Henry Cowell did a lot to sort of push and sort of experiment with new sounds and new resources for composers in the 20th century. And this avoids any talk of serialism or any sort of non-tonal stuff, but it does kind of come from a familiar place, where if we think about a piano as having this good sound source, and one of the first parts that we sort of talk about is his use of the piano and as a full range percussion instrument. If you look inside the piano, for instance, not just keys that you can press, but there's also, of course, strings in the soundboard of the piano harp there, which you can utilize to make very vibrant sound effects and supportive sounds. He also incorporated tone clusters for effect, and other things. This first video, which I'll try to open in a new tab, let's see. There we go. This video is a demonstration of these tone clusters and how they have an effect on the piece. And so he describes his notation for this, which is somewhat unconventional, and the sounds that result. Kind of hear in the background there, I hope. Note that they're in combination with traditional notes to provide an echo or a background effect. And so, taking a moment to listen to these clusters, you can see these white note clusters, they're just basically played with your forearm on the keys with the pedal down, provides a really interesting backdrop to these normal sounding keys being played on the right hand with actual pitches and an actual key and so on. So I'd like you to listen to this one and give it a good, listen, especially the Tides of I always forget how to pronounce the title of this one. Manaunan. The Tides of Manaunan. And it explores clusters and other types of combinations of chords in a unique way, in a very tasteful way, I think. And that's kind of the point too, is that we're going to explore these sounds not to be extreme or to be, absolutely experimental, but we are accepting these other sounds and, finding ways to be musical with them. This other example also utilizes other techniques to play inside the piano harp, to get interesting sounds. And there's a whole lot of description of what that is on here. But this one's more experimental and has really cool sounds in it too, which I appreciate if you would give it also a nice listen and check out some of the techniques that are happening here. Finally getting some notes here in this playback. So again, please give this one a listen and kind of absorb some of the techniques that are happening in there. Next, we can talk about Cowell's approach to polychords and what polychords really mean. And this PDF is basically a list of basically a series of slides, which I have as a PDF here. And it uses the Overtone series as a foundation for the combination of overtones and to create polychords. And this might look rather technical and rather sort of intimidating, but to boil it down to basic concept is and this type of typeface also doesn't help. It's from an older publication, but in general, the Overtone series, of course, especially if you're a brass player or if you're familiar with the strings, right? The Overtone series provides for us a lot in terms of a model for not only chord voicing and for tonality, but also it also helps to basically decide what is dissonant and consonant in some ways. If we think of our standard traditional triads, C major, D major, G minor, those kinds of triads can be combined to create two chords at once, or polychords. The roots of those chords can be thought of as having either a consonant or dissonant relationship. So we can use the Overtone series of the first chord to determine whether the relationship of the second chord will be consonant or dissonant. So let's take an example of C major. Okay, C major has an overtone series that starts with an octave. Right? If I use the roots an octave apart, they're the same chord and it's very consonant. Right? The next overtone in the overtone series for C major is the fifth, which is G. And if I play two major chords a fifth apart, they're less consonant than just simply two C major chords, but they're not very dissonant either. If you listen to C major and then D major, right, and you put them together, you have a pretty traditional sonority that we call the 9 chord, right, which is a C major plus a major 7 plus a major 9, and so we have a C major 9 chord, which is used quite a bit and sounds really nice. So those are two also polychords. It's a C major triad and a G major triad. They're just very closely related in terms of overtone series. To use an extreme example of ones that would not be closely related, we could think of the tritone as being a distant relationship. So for instance, from C major to F major, right? Those two chords have a tritonal relationship in terms of the root, right? And so that sound is very dissonant to us because the overtone series maps that tritone as a farther partial away from the fundamental. It also depends on how you voice it. If I put them right next to each other, they're very crunchy. If I voice it sort of farther apart, less crunchy but still kind of crunchy. If I voice them a little bit more, carefully, I can sort of compose them in a way where the voicing allows the dissonances to be spread farther apart, and so they're not as dissonant. So there's a whole spectrum to polychords. There's ones that are close related, and then there's ones that are kind of in between. If we think about, C major to E major, C major to, so that's the third apart, C major to E flat major, right? And if you experiment with putting major and minor triads together, you can come up with a series of chords that have kind of a progression to them. If we think about how those chords kind of relate to each other, right? If we kind of think about one as having a foundation, and one is not having a foundation, or not a close relationship to that foundation, right? So we're thinking about composing with polychords in a way where we create a counterpoint of chords, if you will, where you're creating a chord against chord relationship. And so this slide attempts to kind of simplify what, and again, what we're trying to do is basically just experiment with combinations of chords. And so if a lot of this is kind of, pretty intense in terms of terminology and things, that's okay. Just bear with it and try to just sort of see it for the basics of what it is combining chords that are either related or not related. So for instance, we can think about C major having this dominant relationship with the next one in the Overtone series. Henry Cowell also talks about the Undertone series, which is the same as the Overtone series, but it just goes below. It goes downward instead of up. So like, for instance, the Overtone series would go from C to C to G to C to E and so on. The Undertone series would then go down in the same way, or an inversion of it. So you would go C to C, and instead of to G, you go down a fifth to F, and then down a third to D, and so on and so forth. So you create all these other relationships to explore. So we can think of these as being sort of also some combinations to check out and to explore. And so C minor and F minor, C minor and B flat minor. These create all kinds of close relationships that can be kind of considered to be related in some way. So that's kind of the gist of this polychordal experience that we're going to undertake here, where we're going to try to compose with polychords in some sort of way. So if I go back over here to our list of stuff, we have some other examples. This Persichetti PDF is a chapter from his harmony book, which is actually a good, I think a great resource actually for folks who are interested in composing in the more sort of modern style from the, if you consider, 20th century, mid-century, quasi-tonal music to be 20th century music or forward. Persichetti has a really good book on harmony that also explores or talks about polychords or added notes, ways to expand upon or alter a standard triad. With the idea that standard triads are kind of tired and in need of some sort of color, and that's what we're trying to do here. So if I could go back over here to our assignment, one of our assignments for this week, for this module, is to write a series of chords and a progression. And this, I really like this assignment for the undergrads I work with here in this regard. And I think you guys might enjoy this too, is just sitting at the piano and just putting chords together and writing a series of progressions. And I use the haiku as kind of a model, as a way to give us a structure. So we're writing 5. So if a haiku is 5, 7, and 5, it's basically three lines. We are also going to write 3 lines of chords. The first line will have 5 chords. The second line will have 7 chords, and the third line will have 5 chords. You're creating 3 phrases. You're basically composing them in a chorale texture, but basically we're just putting triads together. So you can think of it as a grand staff with a triad on each one. The first phrase consists of 5 chords, the second phrase 7, and then third phrase is 5. Each phrase must include 1 tone cluster, not more than 2. So you can choose where to put that tone cluster. If you want it to start out with a bang and be really dissonant at the beginning and then gradually taper to something more consonant, then you could work your way that way. But you're thinking of the cluster as being the ultimate in dissonance in some sort of way. And that, maybe a C and G chord, C major, G major chord would be the most consonant. You can reuse some chords, but each line must have its own arc or could possibly stand on its own as a phrase. You're ending each phrase with a fermata kind of in the chorale style. But you're not writing it in SATB style like in a theory class. You're just writing 2 layers of triads. You don't need to write a key signature because we're not really utilizing a key. And you can use meter, but just don't use 4/4 or cut time. Change your meter within a phrase if you want to. You're using meter in a very fluid way as well. So you're paying attention to the relative consonance and dissonance of your sonorities, and making decisions about how your phrases begin and end, given what we talked about with relative dissonance and relative consonances. I have some examples here. Did I upload them yet? I thought I put them in here. Excuse me. Should have checked that out before I hit record. I do have student examples of this project that I'd like to share with you to give you a starting point. I don't see the link listed here, so I must have put them somewhere else or screwed up the upload. But I'll go ahead and put a folder of student examples. Oh no, I think I put it in the assignment Dropbox. Actually, there we go. So here's a link to a PDF of Cowell's new musical resources. This is probably a PDF to the whole book, which is probably not useful. But if you wanted to do further reading, you could look at that. But these other 2 are student examples of what students have done with this assignment. And some of them are composed out like this, where there's some passing notes and some melody. And I've, of course, redacted names. But some of them are a little bit more straight ahead with just chords, and that either way is fine. What we're looking for is just kind of a general sense of the exploration of these sounds. And they sound really pretty good, honestly. And that is what we're doing here. So please upload I guess I don't have what to upload here, but I'm looking for an audio file, please, and a PDF of your score. That makes it easier for me to hear and see what you're doing. Our second half to this first half is the exploration of scale. And this is similar to these polychords, in that we are taking major and minor and altering them or thinking about them in a more broad way. The music of Bartók does this quite a bit, actually, and this is an example we can listen to think about how he is using scale and even key signature to explore different scales. So the idea is that we can take a major scale, or modes is a good example of this, right? If we take C major, and instead of it keeping all the same notes of C major, we wanted to alter it to be mixolydian. If you're really good with your modes, you would know that C major could be turned into C mixolydian by lowering the 7th scale degree by a half step. And so we now have, right? So that's altering basically a major scale to be another mode. Any scale can be altered in any way to create anything else that you so desire. We don't have to stick to just major and the 3 minors. We can take a major minor mode. Let's take C minor, and I can make C minor Phrygian by adding a flat 2. And so what I'm asking us to do is just to take a familiar scale and alter it in some way. Taking a major scale and raising the 4th scale degree creates a unique sound. That's not major, it's not minor. It's something unique to you or unique to your choice. So sharp 2 and sharp 4 create an interesting combination. Or sharp 2, sharp 4, flat 7. I don't know. I'm sorry. So this requires some sitting and sort of exploring scales for what they are. And so for this part of the assignment, for this module, this portion of the module, is simply just to write 2 unique scales by altering one of the following types of scales, either a mode or interval patterns or any of the cultural or chordal scales that we see on this list. And I have a list of some scales here for your perusal, just to kind of check out and play through. where we have some pentatonic scales. That's kind of a chordal scale where you take a series of fifths and you turn it into a scale, and you have a pentatonic scale. Right. We have other cultural scales here, which are really cool. Some Indonesian scales, of course, Pelog, which is a traditional Indonesian pentatonic scale. And then we also have some other possibilities here. So I encourage you to explore some scales in this assignment. So write 2 scales that have been altered in some way. And then I'm looking for their complements. So I wish I had a whiteboard to describe this with, but a complement scale is a set of notes that aren't in the original scale that would make up put together, the 2 scales would make the chromatic scale. So for instance, if I look at the C pentatonic scale, that's C, D, E, G, A, and C. The notes that aren't in that scale would be its complement. So C sharp, D sharp, F, F sharp, G sharp, and B and A sharp. That would be its complement. So it's like you're looking at the scale, you're comparing it to the chromatic scale, and you're pulling out the notes that it doesn't have, and you're making a second scale with that. That's its complement. Sometimes a complementary scale will make even more exciting possibilities. And so we're looking at your altered scale and its complement, and another altered scale and its complement. And so that's 4 scales in total that you're putting into notation and uploading to the Dropbox as a PDF. If you have any questions about this part, just please reach out. I hope this has done justice in explaining. Again, I don't have the ability to show you exactly what I mean, but perhaps I'll write up an example to include as a PDF for you guys. And I'll add that to the Dropbox here. If you have any questions about this material, please reach out. I'll be happy to help. Good luck and have fun.